Welcome back, everybody. We're going to go ahead and continue on with our video series, creating a scenario. Let's go ahead and jump right into it. I'm going to go ahead and do this a couple times, showing you, launching from the desktop, but eventually at some point we're going to not do that. So we're here. We have our little project. I'm going to go ahead and open it up. Brings us into the resource manager. Click on the world editor, open our scenario. Now, the last thing we did was we added our managers. We've got rid of the loadout manager. We got rid of the faction manager and the loadout manager and added our own managers, replacing the two that the plugin that gave us. So we ran this game mode plugin. It gave us a set of default managers and entities that are required for the game mode, and then we removed the loadout manager and the faction manager because we want to use something a little different than what they provided us with. Now, to continue on with this, we need to finish setting up our loadout manager, because in here you can see that there are no player loadouts, and because we are playing PvE, we need a player loadout to get us going. So all we have to do is you have this, this is a category or attributes. This is a field down here. So you go to the player loadouts, you add an element with the little plus sign, and then you're presented with these four choices. So in our case, we want to select faction player loadout. Okay, that's the one you want to use. You go to the loadout name. You can name it whatever you want. So we're going to call this U.S. Army Soldier. Okay. And then the resource that we're going to use is going to be, we're going to use the base rifleman. So we can go char, character, and then rifle. Okay. And then we're filtering out. So we're going to use the U.S. as our default, or as our character. We're going to play from the U.S. side, and the U.S. faction is the default faction for the scenario framework. So if you want to play another faction, you have to do a little bit more work, and we'll try to go over that and discuss that. The loadout image is not required, but you can select one. So if you click the two dots, and it shows you choose the M_S loadout image EEDS files. So that's telling you what to look for. Type in .eds and it will bring up a list of all the .eds files. Okay, as you can see, there's tons of them. So then we want to put in character, US, rifle. Okay, and it will filter out everything and give us the character US rifleman. Okay, notice that it says because US and USSR, it also gives you those. So to properly filter out the USSR, you put a back underscore on the S, or you can put it on the front, but I think you have to put it on the back to fully eliminate. Yeah, so just to let you know about that. Okay. And then affiliated faction, you want to put in your faction. And so how do you know what your faction is? Well, you can go to your faction manager, and when you drop down, it says faction key, and it's US. Okay, so that is the unique identifier for this faction. So you go to your loadout manager and affiliated faction. It says no description available. Unfortunately, it doesn't tell you. So put in US, and it does, capitalization matters. You have to match the casing of the lettering that you're using. So put in US there. Okay. So we're going to save that. We now have at least one loadout, which is required to carry on. The next thing we want to look at is you go to your faction manager, and you want to make sure that you have one faction that is set to playable. So you can see this one says is playable. So none of these are checked. So if we were trying to launch this, it wouldn't let us go because we don't have a playable faction. So you hit US is playable, and then underneath that it says show in welcome screen if non-playable. I would probably uncheck these, even though they're not really going to show up. Go ahead and just uncheck them for good measure. And this is not checked on the civilian faction. Okay. Save that. Now, in the game mode, so the next thing you want to do is you want to look at the game mode. We set up the AI world. We don't have to go back to that. So in the game mode, you can see there are a lot of components. We are going to manipulate this game mode later in our tutorials to get it to do things that we want it to do. From the get-go, you don't need to change anything in this game mode at this point. We should be able to now hit play and we will spawn in. So let's make sure play from viewport. Let's open up our viewport so we can see a little bit more. And we're not going to play from camera position. So let's hit play. And let's see what it gives us. Okay, it drops us in the water. And we don't go anywhere. And that's because we don't have a spawn point. Okay, so we're not totally set up yet. Okay, you have to have a spawn point to go to be able to spawn in. Okay, so what we want to do is what we're going to make is this is going to be our base over here. There's military bases, there's airport, the harbor. We have a military base down, where's that at? We have a military base here. So what we're going to use is this military base as our HQ, okay, for our troops. So what you want to do at this point to get a spawn point in the world and use the scenario framework, we want to create a new layer. So we're going to go on highlight our world, type create new layer, and we're going to call this US start position. You can call it anything you want. We're going to go ahead and highlight it so that it is now the active layer in our world, so that when we select things out of it, we will put things in this layer. Okay, now I'm going to remove those things. So in the scenario framework, all right, if you type in scenario F, it will take you to a folder in this path right here called Scenario Framework. As you can see, it goes Arma Reforger Prefab Systems Scenario Framework. All right, this is where the components are for the Scenario Framework. Now it's filtering out everything so we don't see that. So if you unfilter that and you leave this checked, okay, or highlighted, and you go up to this little blue star, this will add the current folder to favorites. So you click on that, and now we have a quick reference. It's a favorite so that we can get back to it early or quickly. All right, so that's really, you want to do that so you can speed up your work process. And then inside this folder, the Scenario Framework folder, we have all these subfolders. The main one you're going to be working out of is going to be called Components. All right. So you double click on your component folder, and it takes you into all these different prefabs. Okay, there's numerous prefabs in here, and we're going to probably go through each one of these as we build our scenario. We'll cover their what they do and their different meanings. Okay, so for our first prefab for the scenario framework, you always start with the area. Okay, so we're going to drag and drop this in, and it's going to put the area and assign it 1 into our US start position world layer. So the next thing you want to do is you position the area where you want it on the map, but then you go down to the next item, which is the layer. And you take the layer and you drag and drop it and hover over the area and drop it. So it nests it inside the area, okay? And then the third item you want is you go down to slot. So we're up here, we scroll down, we find the slot, or you can filter on it, okay? And it will sort out all the slots, okay? And the reason I show you filtering is because filtering speeds up everything. So you'll do a lot of filtering. You go to your slot, and you take it and drag and drop it in your layer, okay? Now this is called the hierarchy. And this hierarchy of area, layer, slot is required in Scenario Framework. You cannot take a slot and drop it into a world layer and expect it to work. It will not, okay? You have to have an area, and inside that area you must have a layer, and inside that layer is where you put your slots. You cannot put your slots in the world layer, and you cannot put it in the area. It has to be inside a layer. And same thing with the layer. The layer must be in the area, and the area can sit in the world, okay? This is how the Scenario Framework is designed to work, and it allows you to manipulate all the slots and layers, and then it will let you do different things with that. And so this is kind of a rule that you must have an area, layer, slot, okay? And we'll expand on this hierarchy subject as we build, and you'll see the different things that you can do with it, okay? Now, the area is this area here. Now what we're going to do, and we're going to go over all this, this is basically a area that you can see here. I checked show debug shapes in Workbench and in runtime, and it drew this dome, okay? This outlines the radius of your area, and we're going to get more into the components of the area, but for right now I just want to show you that this right now is the size of our area, and this radius is 750 meters at this point, okay? The next thing down is the layer, and if we go to layer and we hit show debug, nothing happens, okay? There's no drawing going on, okay? You don't even see it, all right? Because there is no dome that's going to be displayed there, so you don't have to turn those on. And then the next item down, the slot, is what you want to attach your objects that you want to spawn. So in the slot, we have these attributes or categories, all right? And we'll go over all these. You have an attribute called asset. So you expand that asset, and you can see it says faction key, object to spawn, faction switch objects, an ID, use existing world, override object display name, and can be garbage collected. Okay, these here are all utilized in different situations, so when we get to those situations is when we'll cover those items. For right now, to get a spawn point in the world, we need to have an object to spawn. And you click on the browser, and once again you filter. So what we're looking for is a spawn point, so we go, okay, spawn point, okay? And as you can see, it brings up numerous spawn points. What we're looking for is a US spawn point, and we want it to be a prefab. So we say spawn point space US.et, and you will be presented with a list of those items, okay? Down here, you have two types of prefabs. You have prefabs here and prefabs editable. Okay, these are used in the editor. So I would not recommend that you use anything that is preferenced or prefaced with an E underscore. Okay, use the ones that do not have the E underscore on them and select those. And of course, these are all used in different scenarios. So here's spawn point US, and spawn point USSR. If the USSR faction, then you would use the USSR. This one here is for, I believe, combat patrol, and this is for single player. So for us, we want to use spawn point underscore us.et. Okay, so that is selected. Let's go ahead and save at this point. And we now have a spawn point down. And if we zoom in on it, you can see that all it is just a little box with a gizmo. This is called a gizmo, the arrows, and you can change those gizmos as you see fit. Pressing the Q, W, or E key will present you with a different gizmo. All right, and then of course I think R has another type of gizmo. So this is scale, so you don't want to really mess with that. Let's see, did I change the scale? Yep. Unless you want to do something special with scale, then I would stay away from that. So Q, this here is this gizmo, which is ground manipulation tool. So here you can just move it around. And then W will give you the axis. So this uses a special axis. It's called left-hand axis, I believe, where the Z is actually this blue line. The Y is the actual vertical, and the X is the X-axis. So it's a little different than what you normally would see in, say, a graph. Okay, so where the X is always the bottom, and then the Y would be the vertical line, and then the Z would be the Z-axis, which would be the height. Well, the Z in this case is the forward motion here, and the red, or the X, is the side-to-side motion, and then the Y is the vertical. So you go up and down with that, okay? So we have our spawn point now placed. We're going to save that, and now let's try to hit play. Okay, takes us in. See, it took us and put us in the ocean and then threw us to the base. So we're now in the game. We're as our character, U.S. Rifleman, and we're starting to build our scenario of actually how it's going to play. Okay? So we're good. We're moving along. Now, that setup there where we spawn in the ocean and then we get thrown to the spawn point is not really presentable. It's not what you really want. Okay, so this is where you want to do some editing on your game mode. So if you go to your game mode, you have gamemodeSF, and you go down to the component. Okay, so if I wanted to add a component, you go add component. These have a list of components in it. If you go to your SCR underscore respawn system component and you highlight it, okay, it will tell you that this current spawn logic that it's using is auto spawn logic, and that's what is doing that, creating you and throwing you to the water and then moving you to the spawn point. It's really not what you want for your scenario. So what you want to do is change this. So you right click on the auto spawn logic with your mouse, and then you go down to change class. Okay, and what we'll do is bring up a list of 3 classes. What we want to use here is the menu spawn logic. Okay, so you select the menu spawn logic. You don't have to check anything else from this point. You just leave it at default, and you'll get a different entry into your scenario from the spawn point. So if we select play now, we'll be presented with a different option. Okay, now we get a deployment setup. Okay, and from there we can set our position. So we have 6 slots. These are all default. So it's US faction. This is the faction manager coming into play. And we pick any one of these slots. or no, actually the first slot, does that change? So we take the first slot and we hit continue, and now it gives us a spawn point to pick. So we get to pick our spawn point, and we hit space deploy, and now we're directly into the spawn position without that jarring movement of going to the ocean and then to the spawn point. So that's how you get a more layered spawning system in the game. Okay, so we're going to hit escape. Do a time check. 20 minutes. Okay. All right. So in the game mode setup, well, let some of these other managers, Perception Manager, you really don't change anything in here. You know, there's some items in here you can change, but you really don't edit them. Radio Manager is, I think, nothing more than that. It's just there's nothing there to really edit. Okay, so you don't do that. You use it so you can communicate. Scripted chat entity. There are some settings here that you can change. The scripted chat entity is what gives you the ability in a multiplayer environment to chat, okay? And more specifically, use a scripted chat, which would be your login commands for your admins. So if you don't have scripted chat entity in your scenario, you will not be able to log in on this server as admin and use Game Master. Okay, Game Master is always available to you as an admin on a server. So yeah, you have to have that. And then Task Manager, of course, Task Manager manages all the task components of the scenario framework. AI World, we discussed that in the previous video, and then these other ones we've already talked about. Now you can take, and we can drag and drop some of these into the game mode and nest them, and that will not impact anything. It will just clean up our managers here and make that list a little bit smaller. Okay, so back to the game mode SF. This here, like I said, has quite a few different components. We're not going to go over all these components because they, do a lot of different things. We don't need to go over them. The one component that you certainly want to look at is what's called the SCR_ game mode SF manager. Okay, this is the main component for the game mode. In here, we've got, let's do this, collapse all groups. So you have 4 categories or attributes in here. One is called tasks, and if you drop it down, it says task types available, max number of tasks is 3, and then after tasks, init actions. Okay, so these are actions that can be done after the tasks have initialized, and there may be a certain situation in which you want to do that. And then debug is basically, this is a debugger in which you can isolate layers and debug areas for debugging. I'm not going to get into it right now because we're really not going to do any debugging at this point. Dynamic spawn and despawn is a feature of the scenario framework that allows you to set up a dynamic despawn area based on the radius of the area that we talked about. That when the player enters that area, it will dynamically spawn and despawn the AI. That is very useful if you are trying to keep performance up and increase the performance of your scenario by not spawning in every AI and every object that you put in the world. We'll demonstrate that fully when we get there. For right now, we're going to leave it turned off. And the update rate is how many seconds that it takes for the dynamic despawn to update. Of course, you can see there it says you can click to enter a specific value, hold shift to adjust the value precisely. So you can go like this, all right? Or you can hold control, I think it said. Let's see. Mouse hover over. It says hold control to snap the values in 10% increments. So control and you can see it increases. All right. I don't know how they come up with 10% there, but for us, we're going to leave it at a default of 4 seconds. Okay, and then unsorted entity is basically enabling. You'll see this on almost every component that you touch will always have unsorted, and it will be enabled here with a checkbox. And in this case here, we do have a config, a place to enter a config file to do voiceover data for the whole scenario. I'd be honest with you, I have not messed around with that, so I don't really do a lot with that. Okay, so that's the game mode SF. In the tasks, is that we have these 3 options here. This pertains to based on your task initialization that you want. We will talk more in depth about this and set this up when we get into doing tasks. But for right now, we're just going to cover it. You got task types, max number, and task after init, and that's all we're going to cover on that for right now. Okay? So we have we created our area. We have our spawn point now. We're able to spawn into our scenario. So I think what we're going to do is we're going to leave it at that. And then what we'll do is we'll do the next video. We'll start to build our base out of this. That's where we'll go next. And of course, we'll get more into area layer slots and objects and spawning vehicles and other components of the scenario framework and show you what you can do with it. Okay, so let's go ahead and save that, and we'll call it, stick a fork in it and call it done. Appreciate it. Thank you very much.